The forge hall of Aurelion Academy orbited a dying red star, and everything inside it glowed as if it were already being judged. Heat shimmered through layered gravity fields. Alevats pulsed like slow hearts. Students from 27 species stood at their stations, tall, plated, scaled, luminous, built for environments far harsher than this one. At the far end of the hall stood Lira Hale. She was 17, human, narrow-shouldered, and quiet in a way that never asked permission. Her station was smaller than the rest, assigned by regulation, its tools older, its access ports locked behind secondary clearance. She rested her hands on the edge of the bench and watched instead of staring back when others glanced her way. Watching had kept her alive before. Final assessment, Instructor Veilcore announced. His voice cut cleanly through the hall, amplified by embedded resonance nodes. He was tall even for his species, his chitin polished to ceremonial sheen, mandibles etched with forge runes older than human spaceflight. Veilcore did not bother to look at Lira when he spoke. You will forge a blade, he continued. One weapon. 1 week. Approved materials only. Approved methods only. Your blade will undergo integrity testing and live evaluation. Failure results in expulsion. A ripple of confidence moved through the hall. Some students flexed manipulators already reinforced with allobonding implants. Others exchanged private frequency clicks, prearranged collaborations disguised as rivalry. This was not a test for them. It was confirmation. Lira glanced down at the allocation slate on her bench. Impure alloy. Fractured lattice. Recycled too many times. She didn't react. She turned the slate once, then again, checking identifiers. The serial matched her name. Human. Probationary. Lowest priority. A Veskari student beside her let out a thin hiss of amusement. That stock won't hold an edge. Lira didn't answer. Veilcore moved between the rows, inspecting slates, nodding at quality, pausing where excellence was expected. When he reached Lira, he stopped for exactly 1 second. This is what you were given, he said flatly. Yes, instructor. Adapt, he replied, and moved on. That word followed her as the hall resumed motion. Adapt. Aliens used it like an insult when aimed at humans, as if adaptation were a consolation prize for inferiority. Lira had learned its real meaning long before Aurelion. She grew up on a salvage moon where nothing arrived whole and nothing was wasted. You learned what failed first. You learned where stress hid. You learned that survival wasn't about having more, it was about needing less. By the 3rd cycle, sparks filled the air. Energy hammers sang. Nanoforges sculpted perfection molecule by molecule. Lira's alloy shattered under the first integrity test. Not catastrophically, just enough. She shut down the forge without a sound. No one noticed. She left the hall during the low-traffic interval and followed a maintenance corridor toward the academy's underside. The waste chutes ran there, gravity-fed toward external processing. Most species considered what passed through them beneath notice. Humans did not. The chute intake smelled faintly of sterilizing agents and iron. Lira waited, counting pulses, then reached in when the next batch dropped. Her hands closed around something solid, curved, dense. Bone. Large. Layered. Too thick for standard study specimens. She dragged it free and studied the striations under her wrist light. Growth rings. Compression scars. Old fractures that had healed stronger. This hadn't belonged to prey. This had belonged to something that fought back. Still alive, she murmured, a habit she hadn't broken. Back at her station, she hid the bone beneath the bench and returned to her failing alloy. She let it crack completely this time, documenting the fracture pattern, memorizing where it betrayed itself. When Veilcore passed again, he didn't slow. That night cycle, when the hall dimmed and most students retreated to their rest spheres, Lira stayed. She disabled the forge emitters and worked by hand. First, she cleaned the bone. Boiled it down in solvent scavenged from coolant runoff. Stripped fat and residue until it rang dull and honest when tapped. She sliced sections along natural planes, following the story written into it. Bone wasn't stone. It flexed. It remembered. She cured it slowly, cycling heat through waste vents, letting pressure set its fibers without burning them brittle. When she needed binding resin, she made it from discarded sealant and carbon dust. When she needed reinforcement, she layered, not thickened. By the fifth cycle, the blade existed. Not elegant. Not symmetrical. Narrow, curved, its surface polished smooth except for a line of microscopic serrations along one edge where old fractures had been coaxed into purpose. The spine flexed under pressure, then returned true. A knife, not a sword. Lira tested it against scrap plating behind her station. It didn't bite immediately. It worried. Then it slid through. Impossible, said a voice behind her. She turned. Veilcore stood there, arms folded, eyes fixed on the blade in her hand. That is not an approved material, he said. No, Lira agreed. It will fail evaluation. It won't, she replied. He stepped closer, looming, studying the weapon as if it offended him by existing. Bone shatters. Only when you treat it like metal. Silence stretched. Around them, other students had begun to notice. Whispers rippled. Veilcore straightened. You will present it, he said coldly, so that everyone may see what desperation looks like. Lira inclined her head. Thank you, instructor. As he turned away, his mandibles tightened. He did not see her smile. She set the blade down, carefully, like something that had already survived worse than judgment. And in the forge hall built for alloys and arrogance, the human girl sharpened bone. The evaluation hall was colder than the forge. Its walls were matte black, designed to swallow heat signatures and emotion alike. Blades lay on plinths beneath pale light, each tagged with a species crest and material lineage. Crystalline edges hummed softly. Alloy spines gleamed with engineered symmetry. Some weapons were beautiful enough to forget they were meant to wound. Lira placed hers last. Bone did not gleam. It absorbed light. The surface held a faint ivory sheen, polished smooth by hours of handwork. The edge looked wrong to alien eyes, too narrow, too subtle, almost unfinished. No emitter ports. No resonance channels. Just a knife that seemed to wait. A murmur rippled through the observer's gallery. Instructor Veilcore took his position at the central console. Begin integrity testing. The first blade was lifted by grav field clamps and driven into a synthetic armor block. The edge parted the material cleanly. Readouts flared green. Approval followed without comment. The next blade sang as it struck, vibrating through the hall. Another success. Another nod. Lira watched the sequence, not the weapons. She tracked angles, force vectors, rebound patterns. She noted where materials failed to disperse stress, where brilliance masked fragility. Her turn came sooner than expected. The clamps descended, hesitated, then locked around the bone blade. A few students leaned forward, eager for the spectacle. Veilcore did not intervene. Apply standard force, he ordered. The blade struck. Not hard. Precisely. The armor block resisted, surface dimpling under pressure. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the edge slid, slow and deliberate, parting layers by exploiting micro-weaknesses. The blade did not bite, it persuaded. Green indicators flickered to life. A pause followed. Too long. Veilcore's mandibles twitched. Increase force. The clamps drove the blade again, harder this time. The spine flexed visibly, bending under load in a way metal never would. A few observers hissed in anticipation of failure. The blade rebounded. Straightened. Held. Green remained. That material should have fractured. A Threxian evaluator muttered. It redistributed. Another replied, uncertain. Veilcore said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on Lira. Edge retention, he said finally. The blade was dragged across an abrasive surface designed to chew through military-grade alloys. Sensors tracked deformation at the molecular level. The serrations along the bone edge shifted, minute fractures tightening rather than widening. The edge dulled slightly, then stabilized. Green. A low, uncomfortable silence settled over the hall. "This is irregular," Veilcore said. Lira met his eyes. "So was the allocation." A few students stiffened. Speaking back during evaluation was unthinkable. Veilcore's voice dropped. "You believe cleverness replaces advancement?" "No," Lira replied calmly. "I believe understanding replaces waste." The instructor turned away. "Final requirement," he announced. "Live trial." A panel in the floor slid open. From beneath, a combat sentinel rose, its frame angular and compact, armored in adaptive plating. Its optics flared as it calibrated threats. A ripple of excitement followed. Live trials were rare at this stage. "Risky. Blade wielder will engage," Veilcore continued. "Neutralization required." Lira stepped forward. "Wait," said a Veskari student sharply. "That unit's output has been adjusted," Veilcore cut in. "To account for novelty." The sentinel's plating shifted, thickening at joints, smoothing vulnerable seams. Lira noticed. She also noticed what remained unchanged. The arena field activated, isolating her within a circular boundary. The sentinel moved immediately, fast and precise, testing distance. Lira did not rush. The first strike came as a probing thrust. She sidestepped, letting the blade glance off the knife's spine. The flex absorbed the impact, redirecting force without shock. She closed distance instead of retreating. The sentinel adjusted, swinging wider, faster. Lira felt the vibration through the handle, the bone transmitting information rather than resisting it. She angled the edge toward a joint seam and dragged. The blade slid. Not deep enough. The sentinel recoiled, recalibrating. Its algorithms shifted, prioritizing power. "And this?" Veilcore snapped. The machine charged. Lira met it head-on. Pain flared as armor clipped her shoulder, spinning her half around. She used the momentum, dropping low, driving the blade upward along the inner joint of the knee assembly. The serrations caught. The blade bent under the counterforce, then sprang forward as the joint failed. The sentinel stumbled. Gasps filled the gallery. It recovered quickly, adapting, plating thickening where she'd struck. Lira exhaled slowly, centering herself. She had grown up fighting gravity storms and scrap collapses. Adaptation had limits. Prediction did not. She fainted high, then went low again, slicing across a power conduit she'd mapped in the first exchange. Sparks burst. The sentinel staggered, movements jerking. Veilcore's claws dug into the console. The machine launched a final attack, overcommitting, its mass shifting forward. Lira stepped inside its reach and drove the blade into the seam beneath the central core. The knife did not pierce cleanly. It wedged. Lira leaned in, using her weight, twisting just enough. The bone edge bit then held. Internal components tore free under their own momentum. The sentinel collapsed in a cascade of dead light. Silence followed. No alarms. No applause. Lira stepped back, breathing hard, the blade still in her hand. A hairline crack traced the spine now, a scar earned, not fatal. Veilcore stared at the wreckage, then at the knife. "It learned," he said quietly, almost to himself. Lira wiped the blade clean. "So did I." He straightened, regaining composure. "This trial is concluded." She placed the weapon on the plinth once more. It rested there, unassuming, carrying the memory of stress and survival. Around it, the Forge Academy felt less certain than it had the day before. And for the first time since arriving, Lira sensed not ridicule, but unease. The silence after the sentinel fell did not break on its own. It thickened, pressing against the evaluation hall until even the machine seemed to hesitate. The arena lights dimmed, shifting from combat red to neutral white. Lira stood alone inside the boundary, chest rising and falling, sweat cooling on her skin. The bone blade hung at her side, its edge marked by a single pale scar where force had tried, and failed, to end it. Veilcore was the first to move. He descended from the console platform with measured steps, each one deliberate, controlled. His eyes never left the knife. Around him, evaluators murmured in low frequencies, arguing in fragments, recalculating beliefs they had never questioned before. You neutralized a reinforced sentinel, Veilcore said. His tone was even, but something beneath it had shifted. With a prohibited material. Yes, Lira replied. You ignored Academy doctrine. I followed the objective. A pause. Veilcore turned the blade over with a tool, examining the spine, the edge, the faint flex still present when pressure was applied. He tested it against a diagnostic surface. The readout flickered, uncertain how to categorize what it was measuring. This weapon should not function, he said. It does, Lira answered. That is not the same. She met his gaze. It is where I come from. Veilcore straightened slowly. The gallery quieted further, attention narrowing to the exchange. Explain. Lira took a breath. She had never planned to justify herself. Survival rarely required explanation. But here, silence would be mistaken for ignorance. Metal assumes abundance, she said. Energy forging assumes control. Bone assumes loss. It grows knowing it will be stressed, damaged, healed. It doesn't resist force, it learns where to give. One of the evaluators shifted uncomfortably. Another leaned forward. You forged a weapon that adapts through damage, Veilcore said. I forged one that expects it. The instructor looked back at the ruined sentinel. Its plating lay peeled open, systems exposed in a way that looked less like defeat and more like disassembly. This academy teaches superiority through refinement, he said. You propose survival through acceptance. I propose survival through honesty, Lira replied. About what breaks? About what doesn't? The hall remained quiet. No one laughed. No one objected. Veilcore returned to the central platform and activated the archive display. The blade's data streamed across the air, stress curves, deformation recovery, impact absorption far outside projected parameters. This blade violates no outcome requirement, he said at last. Only tradition. He turned to the evaluators. Record the result. A moment passed. Then a single chime confirmed the entry. Pass. The sound echoed louder than applause ever could. Lira released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands trembled faintly, adrenaline ebbing now that purpose no longer demanded it. Veilcore deactivated the arena field. You will submit the weapon for study. Lira nodded. Of course. And you will remain enrolled, he added. A few students reacted then, sharp intakes of breath, flickers of disbelief. The human was not being dismissed. Not even censured. As the hall began to empty, Veilcore remained behind. He watched as technicians carefully lifted the bone blade, treating it with a caution usually reserved for volatile tech. Your species confuses efficiency with dominance, he said without looking at her. Lira paused. Yours confuses dominance with inevitability. That earned her a long look. Not anger. Appraisal. Humans were admitted here as a courtesy, Veilcore said. Your presence was considered temporary. It usually is, Lira replied. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that, for his kind, carried weight. That assumption will be revisited. She left the hall feeling the gravity shift, not the artificial kind, but the subtle change that came when a system recalibrated around an anomaly it could not erase. Later, in the quiet of the archive chamber, Lira stood as her blade was sealed behind transparent shielding. Labels appeared beside it, struggling to classify material and method. She touched the glass once, lightly. It's not advanced, she said to no one in particular. It just refuses to break. Outside the chamber, students passed more slowly now when they saw her. Not with admiration. With caution. In the Forge Academy built on certainty, a human girl had introduced doubt. And doubt, Lira knew, was the sharpest edge of all.